I'm Mark Allen here on Cash 22. We'll bring in young, up-and-coming professionals and have them mentored right here on the show in a variety of different fields and professions. You were made to do amazing things with your career. So let's get started. Welcome back to Cash 22. On our last episode, we were here with Alex Aggen, who's back again. Thanks, Alex.
Glad to be here.
I understand that you're taking the bar exam in 10 days, so we appreciate you taking a little break out of your studies to join us again.
Well, if I have to be honest with you, which I ought to be, I'm taking plenty of breaks at this point, which I shouldn't be, but it's been a long 2 months of studies, so at this point only so much more can fit in.
So I imagine you're prepared now.
Passing.
Okay.
You aim for the C- on the bar, which is all it takes. So.
Okay. Well, we hope you pass. We have another special guest tonight, which is Assistant Attorney for the United States Department of Justice, Julie Beck. Julie, thanks so much for joining us on Cash 22.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, Julie, we're going to learn a little bit about you tonight and what got you from where you started to where you are now in your career. But before we do that, can you tell us what you do now? Just describe what your job is today.
Well, my official title, as you said, is Assistant United States Attorney, so I'm a federal prosecutor. I've been working in the Eastern District of Michigan for about 13 years as a prosecutor, and I have worked in the civil division and in the criminal division, and I'm currently a supervisor. They call us chief, which is really a bizarre way of designating the supervisor, but I'm the chief of forfeiture and financial litigation. And so I work on pretty much every subject area in the office and specialize in money laundering and financial investigations currently.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what does a typical day look like for you in your job now?
I have a caseload, so I have to work on cases. So the first thing I'm going to do is work on anything that has a deadline imposed by a court. And I'm going to be working on pleadings, preparing for a hearing, or anything related to something that I'm responsible for with a deadline. But I'm also a manager, and so, for example, we're hiring for a couple of positions, so I've been interviewing people. It's also the mid-year, so I've been doing evaluations, mid-year evaluations with employees. And so my day looks completely different from one to the next, and I do have to prioritize every day because I'm still responsible for the caseload as well as the managerial functions, too.
Sounds like you're very busy.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit to when you were in law school, maybe. I understand you graduated from the University of Michigan as well, like Alex just did.
Right, I did in 1994.
1994.
Long time ago.
Okay, that's great. So you have about 20 years of experience in the field.
I do.
When you were in Alex's position and you had just graduated from the program, what was your next step? What did you do then?
I started law school with a 1-year-old. And so the first year out of law school, I studied for the bar and spent a lot of time with my son, who was then 4, turning 5. And my husband was working overseas, and so we lived in the United Kingdom for several months while I was preparing for the bar. I took the bar, and then I started a district court clerkship with United States District Court Judge Horace Gilmore. So I was a law clerk, and so my responsibility was preparing anything the judge told me to do, but preparing bench memoranda for him to prepare for hearings and trials. I did a second clerkship after that, and then I had my second son, Cameron, and stayed out of the profession full-time for a few years and did part-time work on my own. So I would write you a trust, I would write you a will, I would help you prepare for a real estate closing, or I might handle a DUI. But just really part-time while my second son was young. And then I moved back into the workforce, working at a small plaintiff's firm. Then I did a couple of fill-in clerkships on the Court of Appeals. Then I worked at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office for a while, as I knew that eventually I wanted to end up at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then began there in the fall of 2003. And I've been working there ever since.
Oh, great. So you said you wanted to be at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah.
Why was that? Why was that a goal for you?
Well, prior to becoming a lawyer, full disclosure, I was a teacher. I was a high school English teacher for about 7 years before I went back to law school. My husband and I traded turns finishing school when we were first married. And so I knew that I wanted to go on and get some more education. So when I became a law clerk, after having decided to be a lawyer, I became a law clerk. So I saw the assistant U.S. attorneys all the time in court. And I was always impressed by their professionalism, the variety of work that they did. I liked that they seemed to have control and authority, discretion that was granted to them, and that they exercised it really well on behalf of their client, which was the United States, all of us. And then I was very public service minded. Having been a teacher for those years, I was always pretty public service minded. And so those two things combined led me to the desire of wanting to get to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay. And you have several jobs that you described while you had young children. You stopped for a little while and got another job. Was it difficult getting those jobs, or what was that like? Since Alex is going into the workforce now, what was that process like for you?
I always figured that my choice of going to Michigan would give me opportunities wherever I might live. So it was one of the reasons that I chose to go to Michigan. And I also figured that if I wanted it badly enough, that I could get to it. But I also knew I needed to be patient, because I wanted to be able to combine my family with my profession. And I wasn't in any hurry, and I knew that it would take time. And so I looked for opportunities to build my career and skill set, and I was lucky along the way. I had people who mentored me and who looked out for me and helped me to get to where I needed to be. And I also accepted that I had chosen to be a part-time or stay-at-home mom for different periods of my career, and I knew I would need to answer that question. But it wasn't anything I was ever ashamed of or worried about. It was just sort of part of who I was. And so I think plunging forward with this is who I am in all these different ways just helped me to sort of not be afraid or to limit myself in thinking that I couldn't get there unless I were a certain profile of a person.
I imagine that it enriched your experience being a full-time mother during that period as well. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
So for someone like Alex, if he has a destination to be a assistant attorney for the United States, which I'm not sure he does at this point, maybe down the road, what would be some steps he should consider along the way to get that experience?
Sure. When our office hires new AUSAs, they really look at two main things. And one is kind of sappy, but does this person really want to work for the government? You know, is this person public service minded? Is this person really excited to be an AUSA? Is that really what this person wants to do? They love to hear that you would be committed to representing the United States. So that's one thing. It's really something that you want to portray as something that is desirable to you. And the second thing is just to do well at whatever it is that you're doing. We hire people from large law firms, county prosecutors' offices, small law firms, and really it's the ability of the applicant to say, I can do this and here's why, and just figure out a way to say, this is the skill set I have and you need this skill set and I want to be an AUSA. So we don't hire a certain kind of person, but we do hire people who are more experienced. So it's not usually a job you get right out of law school, but there are some people who are hired out of federal clerkships. But it's something that you set as a goal down the road more realistically. Some offices are career offices like ours, where people go there and want to stay there, they love it, and they want to make that their career. And then some other places will have much more of an office that is a springboard. So if you go to Chicago, for example, you're going to work there really hard for 5 years. It's going to launch you off into a big firm job or a job in Washington, D.C. or something like that. And so you kind of can pick if this is a skill set you want to build for a period of your career, that's perfectly acceptable. But there is also a place for you if that's just something you want to do for a long term.
And if there's someone who's either myself or another younger attorney, they may be just graduating or a couple years out, if someone's looking to pivot into this sort of area and they don't have a very specific experience that might lend themselves to maybe they were an accountant, so they might be able to work in your division, or maybe a certain particular experience. Maybe they were a police officer, and certain things would fit in certain types of criminal areas. How do people have? Do people have a lot of discretion, or how do they kind of aim themselves within the organization?
It involves getting to know what the organization does, and so you can figure out if the skill set you have might fit. It also, a lot of people will do clerkships with judges, federal district court judges. And so if they do that, they're usually free. It's not like you're getting paid for them, but they're great experience for any period of time so that you see what's in front of you. You see the variety of cases that can be brought to see if it's something that you really want to do. But there are a lot of people who love being assistants, and so they will mentor people. They'll be involved in different bar organizations through the state or the ABA or the federal bar. And so there are ways to find people that you can connect with.
And even someone being hired in within the USAO, are they oftentimes assigned strictly to one area? Is there a rotation type program, or how do they maybe, if they have an idea for where they want to be, what if that were to change because they get in and happen to find out that they're really interested in forfeiture?
Fine. Yeah, that's totally fine. There are some entry-level places within the office, and there are people that will enter through the civil division, there are people that enter through my unit, and there are people that enter through general crimes. Those are the three main entry-level areas. But if you're a county prosecutor, for example, and you've been a cop in the past and then you went to law school, then you would be able to get into the criminal division most likely, and then you can be in general crimes for a few years. If you want to go do economic crimes, violent crimes, the drug task force, public corruption, then you just get to know people within the office. We have a lot of partnering on cases, so I will work with AUSAs in pretty much any unit, and you get to know people that way, and you offer yourself up as, I'd like to second chair something with you or partner with you. It's really easy to be fluid, but it's good to get 3 or 4 years, well, at least 3 probably, within one place to ground yourself in procedure and to getting to know the court, the judges you appear in front of, and how things sort of work in the federal government, and then you can just do whatever you want.
That's great. And you mentioned also, you talked a little bit how some offices are more towards springboard, some are more career. Do a lot of offices also have just stronger emphasis in certain areas? I mean, a city with a certain problem or certain other things going on, do they, I mean, I don't know what the Detroit office specifically is stronger than some others in, or if there's other areas that are...
Sure. It depends on your geography. So if you're a border state like we are, I know that sounds weird to think of us as a border state, but we border Canada. So we have a lot of international crimes that occur. Then we share some jurisdiction and work closely with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada.
Myra's Canadian, so...
Oh, excellent, excellent. But we have every kind of crime in Detroit. I mean, Detroit is a fantastic place to work because we have everything you can imagine. But then another place, for example, if you live along the border in the south, then you're going to have really big drug enforcement issues and probably immigration issues along the border. If you live in an internal state and perhaps there are a lot of Native American lands, you might have some enforcement in Native American tribal law. Other cases where there's other places like California where you have a lot of people coming in and out of the country, they also would have a different set of like import-export crimes perhaps with customs and border protection. So your geography does govern a lot of what the work is and how big your district is. So there are a lot of places that are very small, and so you might have more work that looks more like a county prosecutor's office. If you live in a large urban area and you work in Detroit, Chicago, LA, then you're going to have a broader range of federal violations to look at. But Detroit is just a fantastic place to work. We do every kind of federal law prosecution, enforcement, and civil work that you could ever want.
That's great.
Yeah.
Julie, I'd like to understand what it's like to be an attorney. I probably won't ever be an attorney. I don't plan to go to law school. And I admitted to Alex last time that I just learned that the bar is because you're going to the other side of the bar in a courtroom. You're actually physically there. And many of our viewers likely won't be attorneys either. Some will. Emotionally, what is it like being in a case and defending someone or prosecuting someone? Can you tell us a little bit about that? And is it what you had imagined, or what goes on inside of your mind and your heart when you're doing
Sure.
that?
I can't imagine doing anything else for my own personality, my own skill set. But being involved as a representative of the United States and enforcing the laws on behalf of the United States is something that I love and take pride in. When I stand up in court, I say my name, and I say I'm here representing the United States of America. So, but with that, so it doesn't sound too hokey, what that means to me is that I have to be able to exercise discretion as a prosecutor so that I am not overreaching, that I am, my obligation is to get to the truth. It's not to win. It's not to rack up the most defendants that are convicted. My job is to really make sure that what I'm spending my time doing is benefiting the citizens of our district. And so I believe in that. I'm very committed to that. So it makes me want to do the job and able to do the job. I also work with the investigating agencies who I have great respect for. So the agencies that bring me the casework include, FBI, the DEA, ATF. I'm using alphabet soup here. I should probably, the Drug Enforcement Administration,
Sure,
the
that's
Federal
fine.
Bureau of Investigation, or IRS, the Criminal Investigations, Department of Homeland Security. And so the agents work up the cases with us, and so it's a very collaborative process. And I like that teamwork aspect. So an agent is working on something, and I can direct as I might see fit, or I learn from them as well. I help them get subpoenas or other things that are required by the court to further the investigation. And then all along the way, we collaborate as we figure out what's really happened, who should be included in our charging document, and what is the appropriate way to proceed. And so I like that I'm working collaboratively with people whom I respect and trust. And that means a lot to me as well. And I like having my own caseload. I like being able to decide what I'm going to be doing. And so when you have a caseload as an assistant, you are in charge of it and you're responsible for it. And it can be a little intimidating at first. You get a lot of training and a lot of support and a lot of mentoring, but you're the one in charge of it. There's not a senior partner that's going to review your brief. There's not someone else that's going to tell you what to do unless you ask. I mean, there's supervision. I shouldn't make it sound like it's, a free-for-all. It's certainly not. But you're responsible for learning what your parameters are. But there is a lot of self-direction that is involved in the job. And those things all appeal to me. I did a summer job at a large firm that's really well respected. And it was not for me, even though I got good assignments. But the structure, the hierarchy of it, frustrated me. It didn't make me feel satisfied because I wanted to be more involved and more a part of what was going on instead of writing a little brief that went to a junior partner, that went to a senior partner, that went to a partner, and then I would know just a little small piece of the case.
And I had some similar experiences.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm still not admitted to the bar, but in terms of some internships and clerkship type experiences, and realized as well, I don't necessarily want to be a piece of a piece of a piece.
Yeah.
I want to be a little more hands-on. So
Right.
I am going to work for a firm, but I'm working for a very small firm, very
That's great.
focused on some things, hoping to get a lot of experience. And you talked about some of the independence you really have to have of managing your own load, managing court deadlines. Right. What either skills or characteristics or even very specific habits did you find helped you to really get your footing underway?
Use my calendar, live and die by the calendar, and set control dates for me to make sure that I don't miss anything.
And by control dates, you mean?
I'll say if a brief is due in 2 weeks, I'll set a calendar reminder for a week before, and then another one for 3 days before. I also learned how to file my own briefs electronically because if I'm really busy and I don't have time to get it to a paralegal or a legal assistant, I want to be able to file it myself in a timely way. So a lot of attorneys who may have practiced for much longer than I have are more traditional and want, I'm going to type this or have someone else type it and give it to someone else to file. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to file it when I was ready. And if that's at 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday, then I wanted to be able to do that. So keeping up on those kinds of skills made me feel more independent. And then I go to training and I read a lot about it. And I have good friends that I will go and just over lunch or otherwise talk about, well, tell me what you did in this case. And so broaden my my sort of colleague group so that I'm talking to people who are not just like me or who are not practicing in my same area. And I volunteer and excuse me, and go and speak. I do a lot of training of people, and so when I do that, then I also am answering questions and learning from them and whatever their skill sets are. So broaden who you communicate with, learn skills that help you to be independent, use your calendar function, and just maintain a curiosity. But I will say that when I get sick of reading statutes and rules and cases, I have a stack of literature that I will go to kind of make me feel like I'm reading something that's not just a brief. So I mean, I was an English major in my undergraduate study, right? And so I have some beautiful books that are beautifully written that I can go and kind of rejuvenate myself when I feel like it's too much. So those are just some ideas.
That's great.
Julie, when you have a case, do you make a relationship with your client, or how does that typically work? How long are these cases?
Sure. Oh, federal investigations are usually long.
Years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
What's like the longest case you've worked on, for example?
Probably an investigation that would last at least 3 years, and then maybe another couple of years to prosecute.
Okay.
And then if you have a trial and an appeal, that adds another year or two onto it. So I've worked on cases. Two of my biggest cases probably I spent 7 years on.
Wow.
From start to finish.
Do you feel like the outcome was what you hoped for? Justice was served?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Federal prosecution is not reactive. So a county prosecutor will be, an event will occur, the police will investigate, the prosecutor will go from there. Our cases, we have some reactive cases or reactive events, but we are really conducting a longer term investigation, and so they always take at least a year, if not longer.
Mm-hmm. And how many cases will you be working on at one time?
It's a big caseload I have. I probably have 75 cases at any given time, with probably half of those in active litigation.
So you're in a courtroom fairly often?
Yes. I'd like to be in there more. I do a lot more managerial stuff these days.
You prefer to be in the courtroom?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel compassion or sadness if somebody loses a case and you've developed a relationship with them, or even because of the crime they've committed, justice was served, but you still have this relationship you've built with a client? What is that like for you?
That's the hardest thing that we do is we can get very involved in our case and feel very committed to it and understand that at the end of it there are people who are going to be serving time in prison, and that's a really difficult thing. And at that stage of the prosecution, it's the judge's job to impose sentence. So when you go to a sentencing, the judge is looking at all sorts of factors to make that determination. So if you have come to get to know someone, and particularly if that person has cooperated with the government in the investigation, and the sentence is imposed, you really have a strong response to what that effect is on his or her family and other relationships, and what that will do to that person in the future in terms of trying to get employed or to sort of get their lives back on track. I feel that way with every defendant. It doesn't really matter if the person's cooperated, because when you do get to that point, you are very aware of whatever their circumstances were in their lives that might have led them to make those decisions that led them to this outcome. And that can be the hardest part, which is why I go back to that discretion part of the job, that it's really important to be compassionate and judgmental, reasonable as you figure these things out, so that you have the proper motivation, because it's a lot of power and discretion that you have in that kind of a job, and you don't ever want to overstep or abuse it, because it has huge implications on every single person that gets convicted. But you also develop relationships, Mark, with the agents with whom you're working. And so when you talk about do you develop a relationship, you do with the defendant to a lesser extent, but you really get a good relationship going with your agents as well so that you can collaborate and work with them. You also have a good relationship with witnesses that you may call into the grand jury or at trial that help you develop the case. You feel very protective of people that you think may get harmed or suffer consequences because they cooperate with the government. It's not an easy thing to do. And so you do worry about all of those sorts of things, and you have to keep them in mind. It's good to be a little afraid so that you're checking yourself properly and you're not just sort of barreling forward because you want to say you won a case.
Right.
And just another question. You mentioned a lot of the people you're working with in terms of investigators, witnesses, and obviously the defendants as well. But in terms of opposing counsel, those that are representing the defendants,
sure.
You're members of the same profession.
Right.
Obviously, you're going to see each other for 7 years potentially, or at least
right.
A few of those years.
Right.
Do you find that most people are also seeking the same things you're seeking, or are they strictly trying to make sure that their client is protected?
Both. The criminal defense bar is small by comparison to the civil bar. And so the criminal defense lawyers, you see them repeatedly. And so you have to be professional. And you do get to know a person's style, and you get to see who's really zealous on behalf of their clients. And you always have to respect that. So, pardon me, at times, some people are more theatrical than others and can accuse the government of all sorts of wrongdoing and overstepping. And you just have to say, he or she's just doing their job and not take anything too personally, because that's really what it's about. Because there's a lot at stake for that defense counsel's client. There are some costs that are pretty high for that person. And that's not my role, and so it's good for me to be mindful of that. But in the civil bar, when I do civil work, it's a much bigger bar, and so you don't see people as often. And those relationships are much more difficult because the cases are typically about money, and attorneys are making money and zealously representing their clients with a bill attached that can be encouraged by a lot of animosity. So the civil bar is tougher than the criminal bar, most definitely. The civil bar is also representing a client that they feel strongly about, but their motivation is a little bit different because someone's liberty isn't at stake. The criminal defense lawyer is helping someone to protect them on those grounds, the loss of liberty and other privileges as a result.
Julie, I have a question that's a little less career related, but I think it's very important for everybody, which is, you're likely a defendant of the Constitution of the United States, and this is something that you live and breathe every day. How can citizens and normal people like me and our viewers also uphold the Constitution of this country and be someone that you would say is a good citizen of the United States?
That's a great question. To be a good citizen of the United States, first of all, you need to be aware of what the Constitution is. There are a lot of people who are deficient in their understanding of the government and their understanding of what the Constitution is and what their privileges and rights are as a citizen of the United States. And so I would always encourage people to be informed about those privileges that we enjoy and what those rights are. Just understanding even what the Bill of Rights is and what the amendments to the Constitution provide and protect us each from. And to respect also that there are differences of opinion about the importance of those various amendments, but that respect for those amendments keeps us all safer and better. So, for example, you might not agree with someone else's interpretation of how important the Second Amendment is, but you should respect that someone else has that opinion so you can have a conversation about it and maybe learn from the other person. So likewise, maybe the parameters of the First Amendment. Perhaps you have a certain viewpoint and don't like someone else's verbalization of theirs, but it doesn't mean that you would then denigrate that person. You invite better citizenship if you can discuss and respect other people's opinions about what those rights and privileges are. It's also important to understand how it all works. There are people who, I don't often tell people my title because most people don't know what it is. So if you asked me what I did for a living, I'd first say I'm a lawyer, And if someone said, what kind, I would say, I'm a federal prosecutor, and then I would kind of go from there. There are a lot of people who don't understand the differences between the state system and the federal system, and that there is a civil side to federal laws as well as a criminal side. So just being informed, and being informed can make you feel responsible and respectful and grateful for the privileges that we have as citizens.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a unique perspective coming from someone like you, so I appreciate it. That's all the time we have for now, but I'd like to thank you, Julie, and also Alex, for coming back on the show. It's been very educational for all of us. There are probably people that have watched this that have decided to become attorneys, or maybe some that were going to become attorneys that said, oh, I can't do that, that's too hard. It could go either way.
Right.
But having an honest perspective and opinion from someone getting started and someone very experienced in the field has been very valuable. So we appreciate it to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. This is Cash 22, and we'll see you next time.